Guys, this is Cagey Game and welcome to another video of Ori Talks Football. You heard it right, Ori Talks Football. Again, guys, subscribe and leave a comment on the video. I'm going to be leaving my reaction to the game between Mamelodi Sundowns and Kaizer Chiefs. It ended up in a draw, but yeah guys, I'm just going to give my instant post-match reaction to the game. And yeah guys, more is gonna come. You've seen a lot of changed a few things on the video on the channel. More is coming, but I'm really happy. I've rebranded a few things, but it's nice to be here talking about the game we love the most with you guys, and more is gonna come. And straight into the game, guys. Because it was a very highly tactical affair from how I saw in the game. Something that I wasn't surprised within, because if you noticed in the past 3 or 4 games that Kaizer Chiefs played with Mamelodi Sundowns, they were very highly cagey games, very tight, very tactical. And the shape that Kaizer Chiefs played in was something that I was surprised with, but something that you from what Kaizer Chiefs played before in the previous game, if you analyze the games that Kaizer Chiefs with Mamelodi Sundowns before, generally Chiefs used to always play in that shape. Kaizer Chiefs shaped up in a 5-3-2. Sundowns played in a 4-3-3 that they normally play within. Kaizer Chiefs played, the only difference was the fact that Kaizer Chiefs didn't play with the recognized fullback on the left-hand side. They played with Modi, they played with Miguel as the left-sided centre-back, they played with Molesan, who was having his debut in the middle part, and then they had Quinika as the right fullback, right centre-back. They had Monyane as the right-sided wing-back. Then they had Tato as the sitting midfielder, and then the Sipe Sitlenglof and Maboy as the 8s. Then they had Langeli Khepili and Luke Bartman as the 2 number 9s. Basically playing in the 2 sides. Sundowns generally played in the normal. They also tweaked their shape slightly, because they changed from a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3. They played the right with the 2 fullbacks, Modau, Modiba, centre backs Kekane, Johannes, sitting midfielder Obas. The 2 8s was Ayende, and the other player I forgot about. And then on the right, on the wing side, they played with Matthews, they played with Van Beek, and they played with Brian Leon as a centre back. So they played in a slightly different shape, but basically what I'm trying to say is that you could see that both the sides were aware of what either team was going to do. So because of that, obviously it was always going to be a highly cagey affair. If you noticed and you've watched Kaizer Chiefs play Sundowns in the last 3 or 4 games, you would have understood that Kaizer Chiefs played in the shape that Nabi and also the previous managers used in the previous games. They were playing Modi as the wing back, and you could see that it was something that the coaching staff had taken from the previous games before. That's why I say that a lot of the concepts and a lot of the systematic changes that they are making are not very different from the previous regime that Kaizer Chiefs have had. From the previous coaches, you could see that there are similarities in terms of what Fernando de Cruz is doing to what Nabi and the previous coach Ben Youssef, Cedric Kazi and Ben Youssef did, especially playing against Sundowns, because they always generally played in that shape. The only difference was that here, instead of playing in a 3-2, they changed it. Instead of them playing with the twin sitting midfielders, they played with the 3 midfielders, and then they played the 2 strikers. So that was the change, something that you'd see. And I think from what I was slightly disappointed, because I felt like Kaizer Chiefs, because it's early in the season, they could have taken the game to Mamelodi Sundowns. But I think two things that you have to look at is the fact that Kaizer Chiefs just played on Wednesday, Sundowns played on Tuesday. And Kaizer Chiefs were generally, and from the pre-match conference that you had Fernando de Cruz, Kaizer Chiefs was going to probably play more or less the same team. And Sundowns, as you know, Sundowns have the riches of having a major squad. But Sundowns also had the advantage of having 1 game extra to play in the game. So Kaizer Chiefs were always going to be very defensive, slightly in the way that they game. From what you could see, the shape was the healthier shape. But one thing that they were trying to do, Kaizer Chiefs, was once they were always trying to make sure that they win, that they were always trying to play off turnover ball, because you could see that the 3 midfielders that they had were very free in terms of as much as Mtetwa was the one who was sitting as the sitting midfielder. A lot of their players were giving their license to, as soon as Sundowns were trying to bypass the first line of press, Kaizer Chiefs, their midfield, especially the midfield three, Maboyi, Spetlenglov, and Mtetwa, they were very aggressive in making sure that they tried to win the ball back. And Sundowns, because Sundowns play a very slow game, they want to keep the ball, they move the ball very slowly until to get that to the final third of the opposition. Kaizer Chiefs, because they were very structurally secure, they understood their roles, and they made sure that the game was very compact. They were very compact in their spaces. They made it very difficult for Sundowns to play through them. And when Sundowns did get a chance, they didn't really create the opportunities that you could call about besides the goal. In the first half, the only opportunity that they really got was the first one that Grant Kekana played over the defense, which I said of that a lot of things that teams will try to do when they play against Kaizer Chiefs is to utilize the spacing behind, because they are a very passive pressing team. So teams will always try to utilize the spacing behind Chiefs, and Mdao used that space. But the one thing that was good about Chiefs was that Kaizer Chiefs were very combative in the midfield. They didn't give Sundowns a lot of time on the ball, especially when Sundowns got to the final third of them. You could see that Mtetwa and especially Mglove and Maboy were very quick, and they were very combative, and they were very fast. And even though Sundowns were trying to occupy the defensive line of Kaizer Chiefs, because they would keep Mudau and Modiba high, and they would try to put Matthews and Van Veek in the half spaces. You could see that Fernando de Cruz and the coaching staff had thought about it and made sure that they played three center backs. You could see that a lot of the times Miguel was with Van Veek, because they were trying to make sure that they maximized and they kept that space, especially in and around those zones, those congested zones in between the right back, the space between the center backs and the full back. Sundowns were always going to try and occupy those spaces. So having Miguel and Guinica on the other side, so that they could always keep Van Veek, Matthews and Van Veek from attacking those spaces. You could see that they had a lot of structure, and they had a lot of protection in those areas. So Sundowns didn't really create a lot of overloads. They didn't play the ball. They didn't have a lot of opportunities. And on the other side, Kaizer Chiefs had a lot of time when they did get the ball. When they tried to play quick. They were always trying to play with Batman and Pili. But because they were trying to play at a high pace and high speed, Sundowns, I think because of the experience, they understood that, and Kaizer Chiefs, because of they didn't really create a lot of situations. They would try to play the ball fast, and Sundowns pressing structures after they lose the ball, they pressed very well, and then they tried to play the ball out wide. Even though there were a few times that Kaizer Chiefs bypassed the final ball and the final decision, because there wasn't a lot of numbers there. They put them a lot of pressure. They didn't really create a lot of goal-scoring opportunities from what you could see in the first half, because the game was quite tactical and the game was very nuanced in that way. And but what you could see was that Sundowns were always trying to thread that ball. They were always trying to play that pass, and which was inviting the Kaizer Chiefs midfield, as the game continued to envelop, that they were giving a lot of confidence to Maboyi and especially Mtetwa to always make sure that they would press them. And as the game developed, you could see that Kaizer Chiefs were getting a lot of turnovers from there. And because of that, and because of the Sundowns wing backs are always out high, those spaces in between the full backs and the center backs of Sundowns were being used a lot by Langelihle Pili and Bartman. They were always trying to make runs to stretch the center backs, so that they would also give space to Maboyi and Spetlenglov as the aids to get into the box. And the goal from Kaizer Chiefs came from there, because Sundowns were always trying to make sure that they play that pass, because Sundowns are always trying to make sure that they pin you in the middle. And then from that first pass, if they can play that first pass, when they can move you into the midfield, they can play the ball outward and stretch you, get Mudau, get Mudiba, get Hayende. So they are very, very good in terms of making sure that they move you. And because they were trying to do that, but very slowly, they were giving Kaizer Chiefs, the midfielders especially, a lot of opportunities to try and press them and win the ball back. So that was one thing that you could see that Kaizer Chiefs were doing, and they were growing in confidence. And from there, like especially Ngov and Tetra did, you won the ball back from the middle field, played the ball back to Langelihle Pili, and it was a goal. But as the game continued to envelop, which was a good goal from Langelihle Pili, as the game continued to develop, you could see that because of one, Sundowns started to bring a bit more urgency into the game, and two, Kaizer Chiefs, I think because of having them played a lot of matches in a short space of time, Sundowns were always going to grow in confidence. And I do think that the changes that Kaizer Chiefs made in terms of bringing in Chislett and Duba and taking out Langeshepil and Bartman were the wrong ones, because the way that Kaizer Chiefs were going to attack Sundowns was always going to be off turnover ball and utilizing those spaces that I spoke about. But because they brought in Duba and especially Chislett, as much as he's a very good player, he doesn't really have that pace and that nippiness that you need. I do think that if you had brought in Mduduzi Shabalala and probably Mfundo or Eduba together, that would have given them a bit more of opportunity to be able to attack Sundowns more. But as the game developed, you could see that Kaizer Chiefs was sitting back even more and more. And because of the Sundowns were starting to get their combination straight, they started to move the ball a lot more quicker in between the spaces between Kaizer Chiefs midfield and defense. They're starting to stretch the center backs from Kaizer Chiefs to pull them out wide, especially in Ndlovu, Sianda Ndlovu, and Cassius Malula were starting to get into those pockets because they were stretching the Kaizer Chiefs midfield out wide. And also you also have to understand, because Kaizer Chiefs were playing a 3 in the midfield, when the Sundowns played the ball out wide, Maboyi and especially Ndlovu had to always mark those spaces. They had to mark that central zone out wide. And because they were covering a lot of spaces, Sundowns were starting to play a lot of triangles there. And even though they weren't getting it off, you could see that they were starting to utilize those spaces. And I think the goal that Sundowns scored was opportunistic, and that was the only way that they were going to score. Even though they had another opportunity in the last minute of the game where they cut the ball in, they stretched the ball out by the shot. But that was a poor mistake from Peterson. I do think that the only way that Sundowns was going to get a clear-cut chance from the way the game was through a mistake. And Kaizer Chiefs created a mistake of their own doing. That wasn't necessary. But the miscommunication of Peterson, of not being decisive in terms of going after the ball, created the opportunity and the defense. And it was quite disappointing because it was always going to be a tight game. And the odd goal was going to be the way that Sundowns were going to score. But yeah, that's how it happened, you know. Sundowns scored the goal. And I think Kaizer Chiefs would be slightly disappointed because they didn't give Sundowns didn't have to work very hard to score. It was off the mistake of Kaizer Chiefs that Sundowns scored. And I think it's disappointing to see the fact that they didn't really have to work that hard to score. And Kaizer Chiefs really worked hard in making sure that they close down the spaces, worked hard in making sure they don't give Sundowns an opportunity to attack the defense. They didn't give Sundowns an opportunity, especially those being able to play those triangles in between. They didn't give Sundowns the spaces, and they were very combative. I really think Mteto again was man of the match again. He swept everything in front of the defense, had a lot of energy, had a lot of fight in the midfield. And guys, I think you could see that now he's the starting central defensive midfielder for Kaizer Chiefs because he gives them a lot of energy. He gives them ball-winning ability. And I think the combativeness that he was giving and the energy that he was giving to that midfield was giving a lot of confidence to Maboyi and especially Ndlovu to also make sure that they press Sundowns up when they did have an opportunity. I do think he was man of the match for Kaizer Chiefs. I think he's putting up his hand up again as the starting central defensive midfielder for Kaizer Chiefs. And I don't think, out of the game, I do think that he deserves a lot of praise because in the previous 2 games, when he came in the first game and also the previous games that Kaizer Chiefs played against, they won against Kokone, he was Kaizer Chiefs' best player. And I do think that now, from now on, the midfield starts from him with somebody else in the midfield. I'm also very happy for Pili to get his first goal. You can see that the more he gains in confidence, the more he's going to be a threat. He's going to keep getting more skill, and he's going to gain more confidence. He's going to gain more ability. I do also like the fact that as much as he was played slightly out of position, you can see that if he's to develop into a better player, he needs to develop in also playing more in central zones, getting more in goal scoring positions. Even though his favorite position is to stay out wide, he needs. I always say that, you know, Kaizer Chiefs midfielders have to, especially the wingers, they need to develop that ability to not only stay on the wings, which you could see that a lot of Modi and Claude Leper from the previous, they were keeping their width, but Kaizer Chiefs need to. The wingers have to be able to be comfortable enough to come inside, to play the diagonal balls, to be able to combine inside, you know, pass and eliminate, you know, and be able to play in the congested zones with good passing patterns and good combination play, you know, going into the attacking zones and making sure that you make runs in behind, you know. A lot of times our wingers are wingers who want to come to the ball, but you could see that when they run with the ball at pace, and especially they make runs in behind, they give the opposition team that a lot of things to think about. And I think that that's where I really do think that there's a lot of growth there. I can see that also Bartman is growing in confidence. But, you know, there's a lot of good things for Kaizer Chiefs to work on moving forward, in terms of the team improving and the teams getting better. And as a Kaizer Chiefs fan, it gives me a lot of optimism seeing that there's a good structure to build from. There's still more additions that are needed to improve the team, especially in the 10 zones and also as a centre back wise. I'm also worried about the left back side because we are not hearing a lot in terms of what the injuries are happening to Paseka and Bradley Cross, and Nkaniso Shinga is also far. But I do think that there's a good foundation to build from, and I'm curious to see what happens from there. But it was a very good game, good point for Kaizer Chiefs under the circumstances. I think it's going to give them a lot of confidence in games moving forward to make sure they put teams under pressure and score goals. There's still a lot of work to be done in the final third and also in the possession stake in terms of keeping the ball. As a one-off game against Sundowns, you could understand that they were always going to be a bit cautious. But I do think that there's a very good things to move from and do from there. I don't think from the game you could see that there's an obvious difference in Sundowns and Kaizer Chiefs in terms of quality. Both teams, even though they comes with different strategies and different templates of play, you could see that Kaizer Chiefs were giving Sundowns a lot of pressure. When they did have a chance, they were looking dangerous. The only difference from the games moving forward is, will Kaizer Chiefs be able to beat the better lower teams when they are given they have the initiative to play against teams that sit back, they play with a low block? That's where the difference is going to come in terms of quality between Kaizer Chiefs and Sundowns in games moving forward. But it's an interesting outlook to see from the team. Sundowns, the thing with Sundowns was that they kept the ball, but they didn't play with a lot of conviction. They played quite slow. They played, and Kaizer Chiefs were prepared for that because Kaizer Chiefs understood what Sundowns was going to do. There wasn't a lot of movement. There wasn't a lot of incisive passing. Even they played a lot in moments, and it was also because of Kaizer Chiefs that they did that. But I think as a team that's building up into the season, they'll click into gear as the season moves on. But for Kaizer Chiefs, I think it's a very good point, more to build on from there. And yeah, guys, I do think the man of the match is Mtetwa. But I think that midfield three, especially because I still have a bit of question marks in terms of the 10, I do think in games moving forward, Kaizer Chiefs could also try playing a 4-3-3 with those three midfielders, because I do think they give them a lot of quality, a lot of combativeness. And even though they might not be able to give the quality in terms of their attacking play and skill and whatever, I do think with them being able to win the ball back the way that they did can give a lot of confidence and freedom to the attacking players to play more positionally free in terms of being able to play, drop in, play in pockets. I think that's something that Fernando de Cruz can do more, playing more in a 4-3-3 when he needs to. But for so far, I think from the game, I think Kaizer Chiefs can be quietly confident in what the game developed. But yeah, guys, I just wanted to give my post-match reaction to the game. More is gonna come. And yeah, guys, hope you like. Again, like, subscribe, leave a comment on the video. Until I see you next time, guys. Sharp. Bye-bye.